today we are in Daniel chapter 8, which means that we find ourselves we're nearing the end of the book, right? We're past the halfway point. There's 12 chapters in the book of Daniel. The first 6 are stories. The final 6 are prophecies. And of those final 6 chapters, there's really 4 main visions that Daniel has. We saw the first one last week, and then today we're going to go through the second one. And we're just going to take our time with it. Since there's less of us here today, I don't want to rush through it. And if we get through the whole thing, cool. If not, that's also fine, and we can finish it next week with hopefully more people here. And then the third vision is in chapter 9, which is actually just a very weirdly structured chapter. And then chapters 10 through 12 really compose just one big final vision of Daniel. Last week, as you can see, I've got a big yellow circle around that chapter with exclamation marks. And that's because it seems like chapter 7 is the central chapter of the whole book. And you can kind of tell because it kind of fits in both sections, right? The book of Daniel is written in 2 different languages. It's written in Aramaic and Hebrew. And while chapter 7 is the first chapter that belongs in the apocalyptic prophecy section of Daniel, for some reason, it also is still written in Aramaic. And so, in many ways, it's the glue that holds the whole book together, right? It links the Aramaic and the Hebrew sections, because starting in today's chapter, we're back in the language of Hebrew. But it also is that, like, it's the first prophecy, but final Aramaic section, right? So it really is, it kind of holds everything together there. And in that chapter, we got to see this vision that Daniel has in the first year of Belshazzar, who, if you remember, we talked about Belshazzar back in chapter 5. He was the Babylonian king, or really prince, who has a vision, or not even a vision, he has this experience where he's throwing a feast, handwriting shows up on the wall, and Daniel interprets that handwriting, and he basically predicts that that very night, Belshazzar will fall. And that is what ends up happening. And so, chapter 6 actually takes place years and years and years later, during the reign of Darius the Mede, which is the Persian ruler. But starting in chapter 7, we kind of flash back and we go back into the Babylonian time period, and Daniel sees this vision. And in this vision, he sees 4 beasts, right? Do you remember what the first beast was?
It was a lion with wings.
Yeah, it was a lion with eagle wings.
Yeah.
And then the wings got plucked out, and the lion was made to stand upright like a man. And we kind of agreed that that seems to represent Babylon. And then the second beast, what was that?
4-headed, was it a leopard?
That's the third beast. There was a beast in between.
Oh, the bear, yeah.
Yeah, there was a bear, and it says that it was up on one side, which would seem to suggest that it was like lopsided. Like the language is kind of weird, but it would seem to suggest it's like a lopsided bear to where one side of the bear is bigger than the other. And then it had 3 ribs in its mouth. And in general, people would interpret this as being the Medo-Persian Empire, to where it's these 2 people coming together to form this one empire, but one, the Persians, is more powerful than the other. The third beast, that's the one you were talking about. What was that one?
The 4-headed leopard with the 4 wings.
Yeah, so there was a leopard, it had 4 heads, it had 4 wings, and it just flew through and demolished everything. And in general, people interpret this as being the Macedonian Empire, or the Greek Empire, led by Alexander the Great. He was not the person who kicked off the Macedonian rule, but he is the most important ruler that really came from it.
Yeah.
And then the 4 heads would represent the fact that his kingdom was splintered into 4 different groups after his sudden death. And specifically, the second and the third beast are going to be really relevant to today's chapter. And then there was this 4th beast, and Daniel did not even know how to describe it. He doesn't even compare it to another animal. But what are the details we saw in that 4th beast?
Yeah, it was much bigger than the others. It had, I think, iron teeth, and it had 10 horns, and it trampled pretty much anything near it.
Yeah, so it had iron teeth, it had 10 horns, it trampled everything around it, and then 3 horns came out, and a little horn rose up to replace it, and this little horn was making giant boasts, and Daniel is understandably really troubled by this 4th beast, to where, in general, people seem to interpret this 4th beast as being Rome. And I even talked about this last week, how there are some people, this is a minority position, some people would actually argue that this could be more reference to Islam than Rome. I would still favor the Roman interpretation, But I've seen people argue somewhat convincingly that there could be an Islamic interpretation here, like the Islamic Caliphate.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily hold to it, but really nobody knows what to do with this fourth beast, right? In general, people interpret it as Rome, but there's other complications about it, right? To where whenever you look at the three previous beasts, we talked about how each beast, the text makes it clear, it represents both a king and a kingdom. And so like one chief leader that came from this kingdom, right? And so Babylon would be Nebuchadnezzar and Babylon. And then the Medo-Persians would probably be Cyrus the Great and the Persians. And then for the Greeks, it would be Alexander the Great and the Greeks. But then you get to the Roman one, and something about it is just weird to where historically we're like, okay, well, yeah, the Romans are the ones who really kind of like replaced the Greek Empire. But it's hard to determine like which specific ruler it would be talking about and what exactly is going on with the, like, it's generally agreed that the 10 horns represent 10 different rulers, but then 3 rulers fall, and then one little horn rises up. And it's really hard to determine what exactly that's referring to. Mm-hmm. Some people have argued that if you count starting with Julius Caesar, well, then there are 9 emperors until the time that Jerusalem fell. And so there could be something to that, to where there's 10. But then you have to ask, what are the 3 that fell, and what was the rest? Yuppie. You're not tough. Yubi, get over here. And so there is this question of like, what exactly is going on there? And sure enough, when you read through the rest of the chapter, Daniel himself is also very troubled by it, to where even as God is revealing other things to him in the dream, he keeps going back to it. He's like, okay, I hear what you're saying, but what's the deal with the little horn? And what's the deal with the fourth beast? Because something about him, like even when he's having the vision, he realizes that this is the most difficult part. The other stuff he understands. That part he doesn't understand. The general point of chapter 7 is that, keep in mind that when we're in the book of Jeremiah, God promised that he was going to send the people into captivity for 70 years. And Daniel, as we're going to see in chapter 9, he's getting near the end of those 70 years. Not at the time when he has his first vision, but he's going to be there that whole time. And so when we get to chapter 9, he's going to be studying the book of Jeremiah, and he's going to realize, wow, we're getting near the end of that. Mm-hmm. It's time for us to go back. And the Jewish people probably have this expectation that when they got back, everything was going to be made perfect, and the Messianic kingdom was going to be established. We're going to see this show up in the book of Zechariah again. Because whenever Zechariah is going to write to the people once they're back from exile. And they're waiting for the Messiah to arrive, yet things are not as they once were. And Zechariah is going to address this, and he's going to kind of clarify things. And so Daniel kind of finds himself in that same place to where he's trying to figure out what's going to come in the future. And so he has this vision in chapter 7, and it directly corresponds to chapter 2, right? Where Nebuchadnezzar had this dream of this statue with really these 4 main parts, and then we even talked about in that statue, like in that vision, how the bottom part of the statue was the confusing part, to where there's the iron legs, but then the feet are iron and clay, to where there's something weird going on there, to where it's harder to explain. And so, really what it seems like God is doing is he is kind of giving Daniel a glimpse of what is to come. And spoiler alert, the kingdom's not going to come as quickly as they want, right? It's like, hey, Daniel, I've got good news. Babylon's going to fall. Oh, that's awesome. But the Persians are going to replace them. Oh, that's not awesome. But don't worry, the Persians are going to fall. Oh, sweet, that's great. But the Greeks are going to replace them. Oh, that's not great. Well, the Greeks are going to fall. Oh, that's great. But then there's going to be this fourth beast, so terrible that you can't even describe it, and you don't even know what to make of it. Oh, that's not good, right? So it's like Daniel's getting a glimpse of like, oh wow, like this is what human history is going to look like, and it's really just a sweeping scoping thing to where he is looking hundreds of years into the future, and he realizes this kingdom is not going to be established the moment we come back from Babylon, right? The Messianic kingdom is still really far away, and so Daniel's troubled by all of this. The vision continues. And he looks and he sees the Ancient of Days sitting on his throne. And this seems to be the one thing that comforts Daniel in the midst of all this, right? He sees God sitting on his throne, and it says that God opened up books and that there were other beings that sat on thrones around him. And it seems like God and the other Elohim have gathered at their divine council to lay judgment on the nations. And so this is the thing that comforts Daniel, because he's like, oh wow, like okay, good. All these nations are going to be judged, even like empires rise and fall, but God is enthroned. That's good news. But then Daniel still turns and he says, God, what's the deal with that fourth beast? what's the deal with this little horn? Like, I'm so troubled by this. And instead of giving a direct answer, instead, God gives Daniel more of a vision. And as Daniel continues to watch, he sees one like a son of man riding on the clouds, and he approaches the Ancient of Days, and he receives from him glory and honor and dominion to establish an eternal kingdom that has no end. And so Daniel sees that, and this would seem to be the Messianic kingdom. And we talked about it last week, how there's some really interesting things going on here to where it looks like the person that Daniel sees very clearly looks like a man, but he's doing what only God can do.
Yeah.
But in terms of like the grand scope of Scripture, this person is making all things right. Because you go back to Genesis chapter 1, and God placed man in dominion over all flesh, right? Over the beasts of the field. Mm-hmm. Whereas in Daniel chapter 7, order has been reversed to where you have beastly figures ruling over man, right? To where the empires are being represented as beasts because they have just lost all sense of humanity. They are just these beasts that devour. But then you have this one like a son of man who is like the true Adam coming to establish true dominion and restore a perfect, restored Eden, and he's going to make all things right. And so this is really comforting. And we talked about how that image right there of the Messiah is going to be the most common image that the New Testament authors bring up to talk about Jesus, right? To where Jesus, his favorite title for himself is Son of Man. Whenever you get to the book of Revelation, the opening chapter, John says, "Behold, he is coming on the clouds, and every eye will see him, even those who pierced him, and they will mourn." What John is doing in Revelation is he is linking together this passage in Daniel with another passage in Zechariah that teaches a similar thing. Mm-hmm. And so Daniel has all these visions, and that correlates to the chapter 2 vision, where after Nebuchadnezzar saw the whole statue, a stone came down, and it crushed the statue, and then that stone grew into a mountain that covered the whole earth. And so the Son of Man riding on the clouds represents both the Messiah, but also his kingdom, right? And so God explains that God will give the earth to the holy ones, and the Messiah's people will rule and reign forever with him in an eternal kingdom that has no end. But then even at the end, Daniel's like, okay, sweet, that's awesome, I'm really comforted by that. What's the deal with the horn? So he can't get past this, and I don't have many answers, right? Like, we talked about this last week, but I don't have a clear answer for what's going on with the little horn. It seems like it could be a reference to something in the Roman Empire leading to the arrival of the Messiah, but there is also stuff in the text which might suggest that this little horn figure is a future leader who is opposed to the Messiah, like so an antichrist figure, an anti-Messiah. And it seems like that's how John interprets it in Revelation, because John is going to use the same imagery where you're going to see a beast with 10 horns and the little horn's going to rise up. And so John's going to allude to this to talk about what seems to be the Antichrist. And so it could be another one of those places where there's a short-term and long-term fulfillment in regards to all of this, to where maybe there was a figure in the Roman Empire who was a type of the greater Antichrist yet to come. And I think we're going to see the same thing again in this chapter, because, spoiler alert, there's going to be another little horn who shows up in this chapter, but he seems to be a little horn, he seems to be a different little horn than the one in the last chapter, because the last one clearly was part of that fourth beast, whereas whenever you look at the two empires we're going to talk about in this vision, it seems like it's primarily dealing with the second and the third beasts, and the little horn comes from the third beast. And so I think that what we're going to see is that, again, Daniel's functioning like all the other prophets, and he's pointing out that there's both short-term and long-term fulfillments, right? To where, in many ways, each of these empires represent this final eschatological empire that's yet to come, right? And so it's not that these four beasts in chapter 7 are supposed to represent all of human history. They represent a unique part in human history where God allowed the Jewish people to be subjected to Gentile powers. But this stuff is going to continue going on afterwards, and it's ultimately going to culminate in this final beast that rises up. There's going to be this anti-Messiah figure, and the Messiah will ultimately come riding on the clouds to defeat him, right? And that seems to be what's described in the book of Revelation. That all being said, where we're currently at in the book, there is a chiastic structure to Daniel, and we've seen that in the Aramaic section, right? And now, as we go into the back half, right, we're in chapters 8 through 11 right here, you do see how there is a parallel between the different prophecies, right? So chapters 8 and the first half of chapter 11 are going to deal with Persia and Greece. Chapter 9, well, I guess most of chapter 9, and then chapter 10 are going to deal with some sort of prayer that Daniel makes to intercede for the people. And then, in chapter 9, verse 25 and 9, verse 27, you've got these prophecies where, on one hand, there's the decree to rebuild Jerusalem, and this is going to be whenever the people return from exile. But then, after that, eventually Jerusalem is going to be destroyed a second time. And we know that happens with the Romans. And in the middle of all that, at the very center of the chiasm, is this prophecy that somehow Messiah will be cut off. And so we'll be talking about that. Hello. And so, at long last, now that Joseph is here, we can hop into chapter 8. And so, Sean, what I'm going to have us do is I'm going to have us read through the entire thing, and then we're going to go back and we're just going to walk through it, and if we don't get through the whole chapter, I'm fine with that. But, yeah, and so I think there's 27 verses. So.
In the 3rd year of the reign of Belshazzar the king, a vision appeared to me, Daniel, after the one which appeared to me previously. And I looked in the vision. And it happened that while I was looking, I was in the citadel of Susa, which is in the province of Elam. And I looked in the vision, and I myself was beside the Ulai canal. Then I lifted my eyes and looked, and behold, a ram which had 2 horns was standing in front of the canal. Now the 2 horns were long, but one was longer than the other, with the longer one coming up last. I saw the ram butting westward, northward, and southward, and no other beast could stand before it, nor was there anyone to deliver from its power, but it did as it pleased and magnified itself. And while I was considering, behold, a male goat was coming from the west over the surface of the whole earth without touching the ground, and the goat had a conspicuous horn between its eyes. Then it came up to the ram that had the 2 horns, which I had seen standing in front of the canal, and ran at it with its strong wrath. And I saw it reach the side of the ram, and it was enraged at it. And it struck the ram and broke its 2 horns in pieces, and the ram had no strength to stand in opposition to it. So it threw it down to the ground and trampled on it, and there was none to deliver the ram from its power. Then the male goat magnified itself exceedingly. But as soon as it was mighty, the large horn was broken, and in its place there came up 4 conspicuous horns towards the 4 winds of heaven. And out of one of them came forth a rather small horn, and it grew exceedingly great toward the south, toward the east, and toward the beautiful land. Then it grew up to the host of heaven, and caused some of the host and some of the stars to fall to the earth, and it trampled them down, and it even magnified itself to be equal with the commander of the host. And it removed the regular sacrifice from him, and the place of the sanctuary was thrown down. And on account of transgression, the host will be given over to the horn, along with the regular sacrifice. And it will throw truth down to the ground, and do its will and succeed. Then I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said to that particular one who was speaking, "How long will the vision about the regular sacrifice apply, while the transgression causes desolation, so as to allow both the holy place and the host to be trampled?" He said to me, "For 2,300 evenings and mornings, then the holy place will be made righteous." Now it happened when I, Daniel, had seen the vision, that I sought to understand it. And behold, standing before me was one who had the appearance of a man. And I heard the voice of a man between the banks of Ulai, and he called out and said, "Gabriel, give this man an understanding of what has appeared." So he came near to where I was standing. And when he came, I was terrified and fell on my face. But he said to me, "Son of man, understand that the vision pertains to the time of the end." Now while he was talking with me, I sank into a deep sleep with my face to the ground. But he touched me and made me stand upright. Then he said, "Behold, I am going to let you know what will happen at the final period of the indignation, for it pertains to the anointed time of the end. The ram which you saw with the 2 horns is the kings of Media and Persia. Now the shaggy goat is the king of Greece, and the large horn that is between his eyes is the first king. And the broken horn and the 4 horns that stood in its place are 4 kingdoms which will take their stand from his nation, although not with his power. In the latter period of their reign, when the transgressors have run their course, a king will stand, insolent and skilled in intrigue. His power will be mighty, but not by his own power, and he will destroy to an astonishing degree and succeed and do his will. He will destroy mighty men and the holy people, and through his insight he will cause deceit to succeed by his hand, and he will magnify himself in his heart, and he will destroy many while they are at ease. He will even stand against the prince of princes, but he will be broken without hands. And what had appeared about the evenings and mornings which has been told is true. But as for you, conceal the vision, for it pertains to many days in the future. Then I, Daniel, was exhausted and sick for days. Then I rose up again and did the king's work. But I was appalled at what had appeared, and there was none to make me understand it.
Alrighty. So this is one of the coolest prophecies, but also one of the most straightforward. Because you gotta love whenever an angel literally shows up and says, "Let me explain the whole thing to you."
Yeah.
And so that's always nice. Like that's why I wanted to read through the whole thing ahead of time, because if we're gonna be speculating about stuff, it makes sense to at least like make sure that we know what we're talking about. And so it makes sense to read through the whole thing first, because Gabriel literally shows up and explains it. So that's kind of cool. And so what actually happens in the vision?
So there's 2 animals. There's a ram and a goat.
Mm-hmm.
And so this ram that has 2 horns will go and basically trample everything. And then after that, there's this goat, the shed goat, that will come and like strike the ram in its side.
Yeah.
And it will take over that.
Yeah.
That's,
And Daniel's troubled by this, right? So he's
Yeah.
like, "Whoa, what's going on?" What's cool is that in the previous chapter, Daniel did get an explanation where it said like, "Oh, these are kings and kingdoms and stuff," but it didn't specifically name call anybody. Whereas this chapter literally just says, "Hey, by the way, this is Persia. Hey, by the way, this is Greece," and so that's really useful for us, just because it makes it a lot easier to interpret this. Because according to Gabriel later on in the chapter, who does the ram represent?
ram was Media and Persia.
Media and Persia, right? And then who's the goat?
Greece.
Greece. And specifically, it represents the first king of Greece, right? And so, again, and this has been consistent throughout the whole text of Daniel, it represents both the king and the kingdom, right? So, there's like this figurehead, but it's also the kingdom that comes from it. And that seems to be how the Bible in general treats kingdoms, right? To where you cannot divorce the leader from the nation.
That's even for Israel too.
Yes. And so like whenever it says like whenever God makes a promise to the house of David, it's a promise to all of Israel, but it also is to David in particular. And that's also why we talked about how the Son of Man, it is a symbol for Jesus, but it is also a symbol for all the people in the Messianic kingdom as well. And so it's for both. So let's break it down. In the 3rd year of the reign of Belshazzar the king, a vision appeared to me, Daniel, after the one which appeared to me previously. All right, when did the last vision take place?
Was the first year of Belshazzar, right?
Yes, it was the 1st year of Belshazzar. When was, like, does anybody remember, let me just ask this. Who was Belshazzar? Just remind us.
So he was the quote-unquote king. The reason I say quote-unquote king is because he was the son of the real king who was over in Saudi Arabia managing other things.
Yeah, his father.
And he's really prideful, really arrogant, and he's essentially killed by the Persians in chapter 8, 7, and 6.
Yes.
Okay.
He succeeds Nebuchadnezzar?
What's that?
He succeeds Nebuchadnezzar?
No, he actually comes quite a bit afterwards to where, it kind of just skips over a bunch of them. So the only 2 kings we hear about in the book of Daniel are Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar. but technically there were a bunch of other kings in between, but none of them were very significant. And then even Belshazzar, he was the second in command, to where, like Joseph's pointing out, it's his father who I believe is it Nabonidus, I think?
I think we discussed.
Yes, Nabonidus
That
was the
sounds right.
Nabonidus was the last king of the Babylonian Empire, but he spent most of his time outside the land. And so we do know from Babylonian records that Belshazzar was put as second in command. And so Daniel just calls him the king because, for all means and purposes, he was.
He's the regent.
Yeah, like he's like whenever the people living in the land, like if you're like Daniel, who's living in the land, this is the guy that matters. Right? Like it's like the other king, he might be the king in title, but he's not really doing as much. And so he's the final king, and he's the one who, not long after this, Daniel will receive a vision. Well, no, Daniel's not going to receive the vision. Belshazzar himself will receive the vision about the handwriting on the wall, which again isn't even a vision; it's a literal, like a hand shows up and actually inscribes things into the plaster. Which also just to me it recontextualizes that story, because whenever we read that story, Belshazzar's like freaking out, and it literally says that he like soiled himself because he was so scared, and he's freaking out about it, and Daniel just shows up and interprets it. And Daniel's kind of like the Sherlock Holmes figure who just he solves impossible puzzles. And even in that passage, you weren't here for that week, right, Sean? But we talked about how that's like the punniest chapter in the entire Bible, because there's like 4 layers of meanings to just the mene, tekel, parshin that's written on the wall. And Daniel just interprets it. But what might have helped Daniel interpret it is the fact that, little did we know, but he's been receiving these visions in the background of all of this. Right? In Daniel chapters 1 through 6, Daniel's interpreting other people's visions, other people's dreams, other people's experiences. But now in these back 6 chapters, we're getting insight into Daniel's own head. And we're getting to understand, this is why this guy is so special. Like, he has this reputation of having the spirit of the gods in him and stuff. But now we get to see, this guy literally was just like, they're all playing chess and he's playing checkers. Or no, they're playing checkers, he's playing chess.
Yeah.
To where he's literally seeing events hundreds of years in the future. And so whenever it comes to interpreting like handwriting that's telling them what's coming later that night, he's like, this is easy. Because he's like, yeah, your kingdom's gonna fall tonight. Did you not know about that? He's like, I not only knew that Babylon was gonna fall, I know about Persia falling, I know about Greece falling, and I know about Rome falling, and like he already knows about all this other stuff. And he's like, did you not know? Yes, tonight is the night that you're gonna fall. And so that's what happens to Belshazzar. And so this is the 3rd year of Belshazzar's reign. I think this is around like 550 BC-ish. And so that would be about 36 years after
the exile.
The exile. Not necessarily after the exile, I guess. After Jerusalem itself fell. Because the exile began quite a bit earlier
Like
than
20
that.
years before that.
Yeah. And so they've been there for, he's been in the land for a while now. But it's about 36 years after Jerusalem fell. And so this is 2 years after the previous vision. And I would also just highlight, there are plenty of skeptics who try to suggest that the book of Daniel was written later on. And one of the reasons they do that is because of this chapter right here. Right? This chapter right here is so specific that many people would say there's no way that somebody could know the future that specifically. The book must have been written hundreds of years later. But Daniel doesn't even really allow for that, right? I mean, there's something like whenever people say the same thing about like Isaiah, right? Like people argue that Isaiah chapters 1 through 39 were written at one time and chapters 40 through 66 were written later. I disagree with that, but the book of Isaiah at least like allows for that interpretation, whereas Daniel does not, because Daniel says exactly the year that he received this. And so if you're going to suggest that Daniel was actually written hundreds of years later, you're having to argue that Daniel's lying here. Right, because he is saying, I received this vision in this year of this king, which would suggest it had to be written at that time. And the reason why we think this is possible is because it turns out that Daniel happens to know this person named God, and it seems like he kind of knows the end of the story from the beginning. And so it really shouldn't be that surprising. Like it's always weird to me how people get like caught up on that. They're like, how could God like know exactly if this is going to be Greece? I don't know. I mean, like, he created the universe with like his words.
Well,
So
yeah,
like,
did I go it outright first?
yeah, it's like, I mean, assuming that the rest of, like, assuming that God is who the Bible presents him as being, yeah, predicting the future is not that difficult. Like, I mean, there's other things that are a lot crazier. And so, in this year, he has this vision, and I looked in the vision, which is good, because that's what you're supposed to do in the vision. And it happened that while I was looking, I was in the citadel of Susa, which is in the province of Elam. I just realized, Sean, isn't Elam the place we were talking about earlier?
Yeah.
That's funny. Like, we were in Genesis earlier, and one of the kings in Genesis 14 is from Elam.
Yeah.
Which is just, it's just funny. And we talked about how that was like modern day Iran. But what's interesting about him being in the citadel of Susa? Or where is Susa? What is Susa?
You have no idea.
I do not know either.
So,
Norai.
what's that?
I said Norai.
So Susa was the it was one of the capitals of the Persian Empire whenever it came into power, right? It wasn't the main capital, but it was the southern capital. To where whenever you get to the book of Esther, she's in Susa, right? That's where she is like living, and like that's where all the story of Esther takes place. And then
Gotcha.
I believe Nehemiah, he's the cupbearer in Susa. I believe that's correct. And so it makes sense that Daniel is transported over here because he's about to have a vision that begins with Persia. And so he's in Babylon, but he has a vision of like that he's in this place 150 miles away. So that kind of lets you know right off the bat that this is going to be something kind of interesting. And it also immediately makes you wonder, why is he in this location? And so the very location from which he is having the vision indicates what the content of the vision is going to be, right? Because Susa is not an important place from a Babylonian perspective, but it is from a Persian perspective. My question to you is, how do you think Daniel recognized that he was in the citadel of Susa?
Right, been there before.
Yeah, I would guess they've probably been there before. Keep in mind that while he was a Babylonian captive, the consistent testimony of the book of Daniel is that he was, raised through the ranks and he became a leading Babylonian official to where by the time Babylon fell, he was third in command. And so it even tells us, like, once the Persians took over, that he, that he was one of the leading governors over all the satraps and everything. And so Daniel was a leader and a governor of the people. And so it makes sense that if he's a governor of several provinces, he probably had to regularly travel around to go visit them, right? So most of the stuff that we see in the book of Daniel, it takes place in Babylon, but he probably regularly traveled around. So it's not like he just like was stuck in that city at all times. Even though I think it's kind of what we typically imagine. But if anything, this might actually explain a previous chapter. Remember Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they refused to bow down before the statue, and Daniel's just not even mentioned. Well, it could be that Daniel was just like not there at the time. Maybe he was somewhere else in the empire, and that could easily like iron out why he's not involved in the story. And so it happened that while I was looking, I was in the citadel of Susa, which is in the province of Elam. And so he recognizes this place. In the last vision, what did he see at the very beginning? He wasn't in the citadel.
He was just by the sea.
He was by the sea, and he saw the chaotic waters, and then the beast began to rise from the sea, right? So this time
we were talking about Mediterranean.
Yes, yeah. But this time he's in the citadel. And I looked in the vision, and I myself was beside the Ulai Canal. So again, these are places that he recognizes. Like he's been there before, he sees this, and he's trying to make sense of all of it. Then I lifted my eyes and looked. I love the repetition of looked. You can tell that he's just like taking it all in.
Yeah.
Then I lifted my eyes and looked, and behold, a ram, which had 2 horns, was standing in front of the canal. Now the 2 horns were long, but one was longer than the other, with the longer one coming up last. All right, so what do we see there?
Talking about a ram, I would assume this refers to Babylon, right? But there's 2 horns, and one was larger than the other. Maybe that's referring to Belshazzar and his father.
Okay.
So it's in front of the canal. So
Well, and also keep in mind where are they at? They're not in Babylon anymore.
they're in Persia.
They're in Persia.
Okay, so we fast forward to the time of Persia.
Yeah.
So like when he's like, whenever the canal's there, just like painting the picture, is there just like basically like a river in front of him, like just like a narrow body of water?
Yeah.
And so in front of the canal, so there's this beast that has 2 horns. And you said in the chapter with the 4 beasts, there was a similar beast like with 2.
There was the bear. It was lopsided.
Lopsided. So like
Yes.
one side was bigger than the other.
Yes.
And that was like the Medes and the Persians.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Medes and Persians.
Yes,
So, like the bigger horns, the Persians, the smaller is the Medes.
Yes, and it even explained, like, this is where, again, it's so specific to where this chapter is just, it's crazy how on top of things it is. Because it says the horns were long, but one was longer than the other, and the longer one came up last. Alright? And so we've talked about how the Persians are more powerful than the Medes. And so the Persians would be the longer horn, and the Medes are the shorter horn. But what does it say? Which one came up first?
The Medes.
The shorter horn.
Yeah.
Yeah. And sure enough, when you look at history, the Medes rose to power in like the 7th century BC, whereas the Persians didn't really rise to power until around 550 BC, around the same time that Daniel was having this vision. And so that's interesting because sure enough, the Medes rose up earlier, and the Persians came up later, and they would eventually kind of unite, but the Persians were more powerful. And so it's exactly what Daniel sees, which is cool. And later on, that's exactly what Gabriel is going to explain. And so I saw the ram butting westward, northward, and southward. What is the imagery of butting?
Like a headbutt.
Yeah, so it's destroying things along the way, right? It's not just running, it's plowing through things. And so this is the idea of conquering and its destruction. So I saw the ram butting westward, northward, and southward. Which way is it not going?
Eastward.
Eastward. Which makes sense because I probably should have had a map up here that we could look at. But basically, if y'all can picture like Mesopotamia in your head, right? The Tigris and Euphrates and stuff like that. So Babylon is like more towards the east side of the Tigris and Euphrates, right? It's not all the way over, but it's like the southeastern side of that. Whereas Susa is even further eastward, right? And so Susa is like on the other side of the Tigris and the Euphrates, just like way further over, about 150 miles over actually. And so you see that this ram is conquering in the other direction, right? It's going north, south, west, and it's conquering all the land in that direction, which is exactly what the Medo-Persian Empire did. If you were to look at a map of like what they ended up taking over, that's really what happened. So they start in an eastward location and they move, and I mean, keep in mind, Daniel is in Babylon, and so if they are moving westward, they're conquering Babylon, right? And so this is what he's seeing. So it conquers northward, westward, southward, and no other beasts could stand before it, nor was there anyone to deliver from its power. But it did as it pleased, and it magnified itself. So what do we learn about this ram?
It was very arrogant.
It's very arrogant, it's prideful, and it...
So we learn about the arrogance at the very end. But before we get to the arrogance, what do we learn about it? Because we have to figure out why it got arrogant.
It's very strong.
It's very strong,
Yeah.
right? It is unbeatable, right?
Probably
Like,
all its foes up to this point. Probably
Yeah.
think it's all real big and bad.
Yes.
Do whatever it wants to.
it is an unstoppable force. And this is important for us to understand because there's going to be a trend that we see throughout all Scripture, right? God will allow certain powers to rise, and He will allow them to have a lot of power, but the moment they think they're unstoppable is the moment that He says, all right, I'm going to put an end to you.
This is what happened with Assyria too. Remember when they were sieging on Jerusalem? They said, "We've defeated everybody else before us. What makes you think you're different?"
Yeah.
And if you read through Isaiah, it says the moment that they credited themselves with all their victories, God is going to punish them for their arrogance.
Yes. And that's exactly what
I
happened.
saw the same thing with
And
Nebuchadnezzar.
then we saw the name. Yeah, so there's this trend, right? God will allow them to have this power to where they will legitimately be unstoppable. But then all of a sudden they'll get cocky, and then suddenly they're very stoppable, easily stoppable, to where it's like, wait, what happened here? And the theology that Daniel's arguing for is that God's the one who decides. So yeah, God said, yes, I made you unstoppable, but then you started thinking that you made yourself unstoppable, and I'm not going to have that. And so it's literally just a decision in the eyes of God. And that's literally what you see with empires, to where they literally seem like they are unstoppable forces, but then whenever they're overthrown, it almost seems too easy. To where you're like, how did this not happen earlier? But it's because it's God, right? He's saying, okay, you got cocky, you got proud, time to put it into you. And so the ram, it looks like the most intimidating thing. It says that no other beast could stand before it, right? And so if this one beast represents an empire, there are other empires that are fighting back. They are trying to conquer, but they stand no chance. And keep in mind that at the time that Daniel is writing, there's another beast in charge, right? That would be the Babylonians. But it says no other beast could stand before it. And so even though he's writing during the 3rd year of Belshazzar, he knows where the story is heading, right? He knows that Babylon will fall, and apparently it's going to happen very shortly afterwards, to where the vision doesn't even start with Babylon. The vision starts with Persia. So Daniel's like, okay, this is going to come to an end very soon. Nor was there anyone to deliver it from its power. So on one hand, no kingdom could fight it back, and then there was no person who could save the kingdoms. But it did as it pleased, and it magnified itself. And so it got cocky, and it got comfortable in its power, which is usually right before you fall. And that's true for pretty much any nation. Unfortunately, I kind of think that might be where America is kind of at right now, where I think that for the longest time we're like, yeah, nobody can stop us, we're the best nation, and it's like, be careful. Anytime you start thinking that, you're gonna fall.
Yeah.
Verse 5. And while I was considering, so Daniel's looking at this and he's just thinking. He's like, okay. I just love, for some reason, whenever I think of Daniel, I just think of like a Hebrew Sherlock Holmes. He's just over here, he's just like analyzing things. He's like, okay, he's taking in all the details. Behold, a male goat was coming from the west over the surface of the whole earth without touching the ground. All right, so the first beast, the ram, which direction did it come from?
The east.
It came from the east, and it conquered westward and northward and southward. Where does this second beast, the goat, come from?
The west.
It comes from the west. And now, you've got an unstoppable force meeting an immovable object, right? To where they're destined to clash, right? One is conquering westward, and then another beast rises from the west. And they're going to meet in the middle, right? And so you see that there's a clash about to happen. While I was considering, behold, a male goat was coming from the west over the surface of the whole earth without touching the ground. What does that say about this goat?
It's moving very fast.
Yes, it's moving. It's literally flying, right? So he's looking, and I imagine the imagery of it is that the goat, it's almost like cartoonish if you think about it. Like the goat is like running so quick that the feet are almost like blurry to where you can't even see it touching the ground. Like it is conquering like quickly to where in the previous verse 4, it said, oh man, I don't think anybody can stand against this ram. And then all of a sudden this goat just shows up and he's like just moving so much quicker. It's like, oh, okay. You immediately realize, I think that this goat might stand a chance. To where he's even bigger, even more powerful. And it says that he's going from the west over the surface of the whole earth without touching the ground. And the goat had a conspicuous horn between its eyes. What's up? What does that mean? Conspicuous horn. I feel like I've looked up the word for this before and I thought it was kind of weird.
I say in English it just means kind of like apparent or obvious, but unless it means it in a different sense.
Something that really catches your attention.
Just right, massive, obnoxious, large.
Yeah, it's just like something visible. So I'm assuming it's just like it stuck out. It stuck out, right? So whenever we see a horn in a vision, what does that typically represent?
Like a king, or
It usually represents like a king, like a specifically force.
It's representing Alexander the Great.
Yeah, and so it would seem like this horn in particular represents Alexander the Great. The beast as a whole represents his kingdom. But basically, as Daniel's looking at this, he sees that there is a particular king from this kingdom who is really just leading the charge. And so there's this conspicuous horn right between the eyes, and this goat is trucking across the ground. Then it came up to the ram that had the 2 horns, which I had seen standing in front of the canal, and it ran at it with its in its strong wrath. And so we saw the ram was butting, right? The ram was conquering and stuff like that, and the goat doesn't even hesitate. The goat just keeps on running towards the ram, and it says it's doing it in his strong wrath. And so you're wanting to see who's going to win, but you're kind of already getting the implication. And I saw it reach the side of the ram, and it was enraged at it. And it struck the ram, and it broke its 2 horns in pieces. And the ram had no strength to stand in opposition to it. Alright, so what happens there?
The ram got rammed.
That's funny. The ram got rammed. Yes, and so what ends up happening to the 2 horns?
They break.
They break.
Now just felt like in a bunch of pieces.
Yeah, it absolutely shatters. And so these kingdoms, they shatter beneath it. And again, I'm assuming that the horns, they represent both the kingdoms and also the kings themselves. So whoever the leader of the Medes and the Persians is at the time, they get shattered. What does this tell us about this goat with the horn? What do we already know about the the ram?
Represents the Medes and Persians.
Yes, but what do we know about?
It magnified itself and it was great.
Well, yes, it was unstoppable.
Yeah.
But it just got stopped. What does that tell us about this goat?
Even more unstoppable.
He's the goat. Right? He's the greatest of all time. The ram got rammed and the goat was goated.
Yeah.
So we get to realize, wow. If you're Daniel here, you're probably it makes sense why at the end of this chapter he's going to be terrified, because he's like, oh, this is not good news. Because keep in mind that Daniel is a captive and a leader in Babylon, which already was pretty mighty. And the ram overthrew Babylon. And the ram was overthrowing everything and looked like it couldn't be stopped. And now this goat made the ram look like it was a plaything. And so the idea is that these empires are growing more and more powerful, and that should terrify you, right? It's like, oh gosh, it turns out Babylon was nothing. And keep in mind, Babylon destroyed Jerusalem and destroyed Judea and destroyed the temple. What else can all these other kingdoms do? And so it should be terrifying you. So I saw it reach the side of the ram, and it was enraged at it, and it struck the ram and broke its 2 horns in pieces, and the ram had no strength to stand in opposition to it. So it threw it down to the ground and trampled on it, and there was no one to deliver the ram from its power. Hey, where did we see that phrase before?
Verse 4.
Yeah, nor was there anyone to deliver from its power. So nobody could deliver any of the other beasts from the ram's power, and nobody can deliver the ram from the goat's power. And so you're wondering, oh my gosh, is there anybody out there who can defeat these things? And if you read the previous chapter, we know that there is, right? There's this one like a son of man who will be able to defeat these things. And so it threw it down to the ground, trampled on it. There was no one to deliver the ram from its power. Then the male goat magnified itself exceedingly. Wait a second. Where did we see that phrase before?
Verse 4.
Verse 4. And what happened after it magnified itself?
Got trampled.
It got trampled and destroyed. What do you think is going to happen to this goat?
Romans are going to come and it's going to get destroyed.
Actually, even before then, the male goat magnified itself exceedingly, but as soon as it was mighty, the large horn was broken.
Alexander the Great passes away at 33, right?
32.
32.
Yeah.
And then 4 rulers apparently come up and split his kingdom into 4 different subsections.
Yes. Yeah, and so as soon as it was mighty, the large horn was broken, and in its place there came up 4 conspicuous horns toward the 4 winds of heaven. And so this person, it's even mightier, but it faces an even swifter judgment, right? To where it doesn't even require another beast to come and overthrow it. It actually brings about its own destruction. Mm-hmm. To where as soon as it gets to power, right? It seems like it's absolutely unstoppable, and as soon as it reaches the zenith of its power, it's immediately cut off. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what we'll see with Alexander the Great, right? He conquers most of the known world in 10 years, and at the age of 32, you have the stories of him weeping, for there was no more land left to conquer, right? And obviously that's probably just more like a folk tale, but there are stories where we know that he wanted to keep conquering in one direction, But his soldiers refused because they said, "We've been conquering for so long. We've conquered enough. Let us go back home." And so they actively wanted to just like go back home because they were tired of conquering so much land.
Like, how much land do we need?
Well, exactly, and that's kind of what it seems like their argument was. And so Alexander the Great, he conquers the whole world, but at 32 years old, young guy, right? He dies. And so he's cut off, and the irony here is that even in the text, we don't know what causes the horn to break, right? It just says, as soon as it was mighty, the large horn was broken. It doesn't say what caused it to break.
Yeah.
And sure enough, even in history, we do not know why Alexander the Great died, right? It's a big mystery, right? People suspect that maybe he got an illness and died, maybe he was poisoned. We really have no idea. Like, it's just like a matter of speculation, which I just think it's interesting, like to where it directly lines up. And you can see why skeptical scholars would argue, maybe this was written by somebody later on, because if you don't believe that there's a God who knows the future and who has all things in his hands, I mean, what other explanation are you going to have? Because it's not like saying, it's going to rain on Thursday. This is like, it's far too specific.
Yeah.
And it's only going to get more specific. So in its place there came up 4 conspicuous horns towards the 4 winds of heaven. So what does it mean when it says towards the 4 winds of heaven?
Does that just mean east, south, northwest?
Yeah, it just basically means that the kingdom was split up in 4 in each direction, right? It's like they each went to their own place, right? So it's like they all agreed, okay, you go there, you go there, you go there, you go there. It's not like 2 of them go in one spot. It's like, no, they each divide it into 4 places. And we do know that this happens. There's the Antigonid dynasty that rules over primarily like Macedonia and Greece. There's Lysimachus's kingdom. That's over Thrace and Asia Minor, which is modern-day Turkey. And then there's the Seleucid Empire, which is over most of Asia. And then there's the Ptolemaic kingdom, which is over Egypt. And the Ptolemies, you'll know them. Like, this is like where Cleopatra is from and stuff like that.
Okay.
But significantly to the history of Israel is that, like I said, the Seleucids were over a lot of Asia, and the Ptolemies were over Egypt. And what is the one piece of land that links Asia to Africa?
The Levant.
The Levant, which is Israel, right? If you go over to Saudi Arabia, that's all desert, and so you really can't travel through there, right? And so the reason why Israel has been so desired and sought after throughout all of history is because it is this one strip of green land that allows safe passageway that it connects 3 continents. It connects Europe, Asia, and Africa, right? And so whenever you actually look at Alexander the Great's kingdom after he dies, the Seleucids are over Asia, the Ptolemies are over Egypt, and so they're constantly fighting over who's in control of Israel. And so whenever you look at the intertestamental time period, right, because by the time the Old Testament comes to an end, the Persians are still in control. By the time the New Testament starts, the Romans are in control, which means that in between was the Greeks. And basically for hundreds of years during the Old and New Testament time period, but between the intertestamental time period, between the Old and New Testaments, basically the Ptolemies and the Seleucids are fighting back and forth, and Israel is going to the hands of the Ptolemies, to the Seleucids, to the Ptolemies, to the Seleucids. And then what we're going to see is that there is going to be one particular horn who is going to rise up and persecute the Jewish people, as we're going to see. So this leads us to verse 9. And out of one of them, so out of one of what?
One of the horns?
One of the 4 horns,
Yeah.
right? So Alexander's kingdom is split into 4 kingdoms, and out of one of those 4 kingdoms, one of them came forth a rather small horn. And so it's kind of like a grotesque image if you're thinking about it, to where there's these 4 horns, and then there's like another horn growing out of the 4 horns. And this would be 4 kingdoms, and then a king rising from the 4 horns. And so out of one of them came forth a rather small horn. And so the fact that it's small shows that it's probably not like, it's not the most powerful thing in the world, but it is notable. And it grew exceedingly great toward the south, toward the east, and toward the beautiful land. Okay. And so, southeast, beautiful land. When it says beautiful land, what's it referring to?
I would assume Israel.
Israel, right? So that's how Daniel refers to the land of Israel, right? It's the beautiful land. And so this king He's going southward. He's going eastward. And the reason he's not going west is because this guy is also on the edge of the Mediterranean. So if you go west, you go into the sea. And so what this is going to be is we have good reason to believe that this is a guy named Antiochus Epiphanes. Right? This is a guy who, if you've ever read the apocryphal books like 1st and 2nd Maccabees, he is the big bad guy. To where he does some really messed up stuff, and in many ways, it seems like, from a biblical perspective, Antiochus Epiphanes is the portrait of what the Antichrist will one day be. And so he's from the Seleucids, right? Where did I say the Seleucids were over?
Asia mostly.
They were over Asia, right? And so it makes sense that as they're going southward, they head towards the beautiful land.
Yeah, that's like what 160ish BC.
Yes.
Is the Maccabean revolt.
Yeah. Yeah, so I forget it. Let me look up exactly when Antiochus Epiphanes rose to power. Antiochus Epiphanes rose up in... Oh, no, he died in 164 BC.
Okay.
So...
I guess probably during the revolt.
Yeah, well, I think he actually died... Well, it was during it, to where he was not the ruler at the time that, like, the Maccabees actually won.
Oh, gotcha.
But yeah, so he was the king of the Seleucid Empire from 175 to 164, so for about 11 years. And yeah, so so out of one of them came forth a rather small horn, and it grew exceedingly great toward the south, toward the east, and toward the beautiful land. Then it grew up to the host of heaven, and caused some of the host and some of the stars to fall to the earth, and it trampled them down. What's going on there?
He was gained otherworldly power.
Escape otherworldly power?
Is this supposed to give off like Babel imagery, just of it like reaching to heaven, or is that just?
I think probably so. Were you going to say something else about that?
Well, just the fact that it's saying that it grew up to the host of heaven, and so it seems like it's in the same way. It's like this horn that's going all the way up like a tower, and it almost like pushes people off like I guess if you're picturing them like sitting on clouds essentially, it like pushes them off the clouds and they fall to the ground, and then the beast tramples them. Is that the imagery?
I'm assuming so. Like this verse in particular, I honestly don't know. Like I feel like I understand a little bit more of the rest of it. I was actually going to look up what some commentaries say about it.
Yeah, reaching up to the heavens and knocking down some stars is definitely going to be somewhere than just like a worldly influence.
Yeah.
Well, I was wondering if like the host here, like it seems like it's referring to like angelic figures.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering if the angelic figures are just supposed to represent the people of God. You know, like the host of heaven represent like since it's like he's going down towards the beautiful land. Like if this is him rising up against the people of God, who compared to him, they're the host of heaven. You know, I'm wanting to see what people say about this.
So the host and stars, it says.
Let me see.
Yeah, host would usually be referring to some type of human or human-like being.
Yeah. Well, a host is usually it's like battle imagery, right? Like a host is like
like armies.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the host of heaven is like the angel armies.
Yeah.
In most contexts.
Yeah. So let's see.
So essentially what I'm getting the imagery here is like it grew so prideful and powerful that God had to be like, I'll just take care of it myself. Or I have to take care of this myself.
Yeah, so it seems like the two general interpretations is that what like I was kind of saying, the host and the stars, it's a reference to angelic figures, but like it represents God's people, right? So it's like you know, if these are beasts of the earth, God's people are the host of the heavens, right? In which case, it's talking about him persecuting and crushing them. Which the reason I lean towards that is because that's what Antiochus legit like he actually did. Like we know for a fact that he persecuted like God's people. Like we know that like there's a reason why the Maccabees revolted. It's because he was persecuting them severely.
So could it be referring to that time?
Well, that's what I'm assuming. Like that's why I would interpret it like that. There are some people who just like they view it as genuinely just being symbolic in regards to he's just exalting himself like Babel, like he's exalting himself against God, and it just symbolizes him treating himself like a god, that would tie into
The next verse.
the next part in verse 11. And so really, I think both could be going on. And so, yeah. So verse 11, and it even magnified itself to be equal with the commander of the host. Who's the commander of the host either way? God, right? So whoever this guy is, not only is he exalting himself to heaven, but he says, I am equal with the God of heaven.
Or he's just saying, I am God, worship me.
Yes. And it removed the regular sacrifice from him, and the place of his sanctuary was thrown down. So what does this guy do?
He defiles the temple. Or he desecrates the temple.
Yeah, he desecrates the temple, and he stops sacrifice. And we do know that this is what Antiochus Epiphanes did. So this is actually a fun fact. Epiphanes means the like what the vision of God or something like that.
And phanos to reveal, right?
Yeah. So
what
does it mean? It's
Phono. Crap, I forgot.
it's like the word just epiphany.
Yeah.
Is that related to the word like phonics? Like
Yeah, it just means God manifest.
Reveal, yeah.
Yeah. But there were his opponents called him Epimanes, which means madman, because he was just like so power hungry. And there is a story, I don't know how legit it is, but I'm pretty sure it's in regards to the Ptolemies, to where I wish that I'd looked up the story more recently so I could like quote it better. But the idea is that Yubi, chill, dude. Yubi. But the story goes that Antiochus was marching south, and I believe that he was confronting the Ptolemies, and he was like trying to conquer land, and then I think that they tried to like make like a compromise with him or something like that. And this is where you have like a guy drawing a line in the sand, and from what I've heard, that's where the story like the line in the sand comes from. Even though people also associate that with the Alamo and stuff, so I have no idea. Yeah. But according to the story, the guy draws the line in the sand and says, "You cannot go past this point." And they try to make like a compromise, and Antiochus says, "Oh, well, I need to go talk to my friends to like see if we can arrive at a compromise." But then the guy draws a circle around Antiochus and says, "You cannot leave this circle without giving me your answer." And so the idea is that he like publicly shames Antiochus, and then this forces Antiochus, like he's just like furious, and while he's marching back up to his kingdom, he's passing through the land of Israel, and it's like whenever you're mad and you go kick the dog. Yeah. So like basically like we do know that Antiochus just went nuts, and he like it was like he went on this like power hungry like just crazed rampage where he just started doing all these sorts of things, desecrating the land of Israel to where he started like people could be put to death if they wanted to offer a sacrifice, and if they were practicing like kosher food laws, they could be thrown in prison, and he did all sorts of things that basically kept the Jewish people from obeying the Torah.
Yeah, didn't he actually do pagan sacrifices in the temple?
Yes, and that's going to lead to that's where what is it? Verse.
Am I getting ahead?
Yes. Does he not talk about like the abomination of desolation at some point in here?
Well, he says the transgression causes desolation in 13.
Oh, verse 13. Yeah. I'm pretty sure that's what that is. I think they just translate it differently. But yeah, so
elsewhere he mentions that.
Yes, to where he offers a sacrifice to Zeus, and it's a pig, right? Yeah. To where he takes the most unholy, unclean animal, sacrifices it in the temple. Keep in mind, he is not a priest. He is not a Jew. Like he does not belong in here, and he desecrates it. And so this is what eventually kicks off. Hello. This is what eventually kicks off the Maccabean revolt, where the Maccabees decide to get together. They revolt against Antiochus and his entire agenda, and they end up winning back the land of Israel. And then they rededicate the temple to God, and that dedication ceremony lasts 9 days, and therefore it is called the Feast of Dedication, aka Hanukkah. And so the story, like Hanukkah, comes from this story. And so later in the New Testament, whenever it says that Jesus is celebrating Hanukkah, that's not something that comes from the Old Testament. That comes from in between, and it's in regards to Antiochus Epiphanes.
I don't recall ever mentioning Hanukkah anywhere in the
Bible.
Bible.
It's in John chapter 10. I think it says that he went and celebrated the Feast of Dedication.
Okay.
And so
I thought you were talking about like the word Hanukkah was used.
no, the word Hanukkah doesn't show up because it's written in Greek. But if it were in Hebrew, it would say Hanukkah. And so it magnified itself to be equal with the commander of the host, and it removed the regular sacrifice from him, and the place of his sanctuary was thrown down. And so this guy is just he's outlawing Torah. So he's literally outlawing the law, and he's prohibiting the Jewish people from actually worshiping God. And so this is why Daniel, like the vision, is highlighting this guy, just because, like Daniel says, it's just a small horn, right? So it's not like this horn is as big as the other ones. He's not as powerful as Alexander or anything. Mm-hmm. The reason why he's significant is because of what he does against God's people. Mm-hmm. Verse 12, and on account of the transgression, the host will be given over to the horn along with the regular sacrifice. So, what's up with that?
So God's going to allow him to do this.
Yeah.
For 2,300 days, essentially.
Yeah, so it says that he's going to allow the Jewish people to suffer under this, which is interesting, right? It gives a different perspective of what exactly is going on in history there.
Exactly, and then it also kind of gives us insight into what's happening in I know I go back to Revelation or go into Revelation a lot, but I feel it also gives us insight into what happens in Revelation with the whole what is it? Rapture theory.
I'm not sure what you mean.
Like how God is willing to let his people suffer.
Oh, whenever we talk about how I would argue that
yes.
we would be here for it. Yes.
Yes.
Well, yeah, like whenever you look at Scripture, it says that God is willing to allow his people to suffer. If anything, what we see is that God loves throwing his people into the midst of drama, so that they can faithfully endure the drama and suffer for his sake.
And we see this in James when James says, "Consider it with great joy."
Yeah, count it great joy whenever you encounter trials of various kinds. You shouldn't be saying, "Oh man, God would never allow me to go through this." Yeah, he would. He would readily.
Isn't the rapture taught from like the verse where Paul's saying there will be a time where God's going to take his people up to meet their Lord in the air?
Yeah, and we don't need to get into the rapture stuff now. We can talk about it like after the stuff. But yeah, it comes from
I
there.
have a comment, but I'll hold it.
Yeah. Were you saying something, Sean?
I was going to say, it's just interesting, like, to me the even more interesting part is the fact that it says that he hands over the sacrifices. Just because, again, for the context of this time period, I mean, God allowed them to go into exile where there was no temple for 70 years, but the whole thing was them going back to rebuild, to be able to reoffer sacrifices.
Right.
And, I think this just kind of goes to show, again, like, how God used those things, and the fact that he's allowing to, like, once again, he's allowing them to be able to, he's giving that up.
Yeah.
So
to where now they're going to be in the city, and there is going to be a temple, but they're not going to be able to do sacrifices. And so you do get to see that apparently the sacrifices in the temple are not the end-all be-all, to where that is not the thing that keeps their relationship with God, like, good, I guess. You know what I mean? Like,
Or to obey is better than sacrifice.
Yeah, and like, well, in Psalm 51, whenever David says, I would offer a sacrifice, but what the sacrifices of God are a contrite heart and a broken spirit.
yeah.
And so that's even interesting even to this day, right? Like there's a big movement amongst Jewish people to this day where they want to build a third temple. And if they did, they would get right back to sacrifices. And as Christians, we would say, well, it was never really about the sacrifices. But yeah, so God, not only does he give them over to the horn, and he allows them to suffer, but he also he allows the regular sacrifice to be taken away. So this is something that he permits to happen. And so, if anything, for Daniel seeing this, I mean, this would be traumatizing. But he sees that even all of this is under God's control, right? It's not like, oh no, I forgot about Antiochus Epiphanes. Like, whoops, I forgot to stop him. No, God's allowing it to happen. He's choosing to let his people suffer. Which that'll challenge a lot of people's theology of God, but I don't think it should.
Mm-hmm.
Then I heard a holy one speaking. And another holy one. So whenever you see the phrase holy one show up in Daniel, who does it usually seem to be referring to?
Would say generally Jesus. Or no, we just refer just a holy one, right? Not
Yeah.
Okay, then like
Basically someone who worships God.
Yeah, it seems to just be a worshiper of God, right? Like a saint, right? So that, like, basically, then I heard a saint say to another saint. So I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said to that particular one who was speaking, how long will the vision about the regular sacrifice apply? Which I think this is interesting because like we don't hear what the first person says, right? It's like, so he hears one guy speaking, and it's almost like Daniel catches them mid-conversation, right? It's like he's watching this take place, and then he hears a guy speaking, he turns his attention to it, and he hears the person respond and ask a question. I don't know what the first guy said, but the second person says, how long will the vision about the regular sacrifice apply while the transgression causes desolation, so as to allow both the holy place and the host to be trampled? So what question does this guy ask?
For how long would you allow this to happen, God?
Yes. For how long will this take place? And the person says, for 2,300 evenings and mornings, then the holy place will be made righteous.
It's like 3.5 years.
Well, so it depends on how you interpret it, right? It depends on, when it says evenings and mornings, is it 2,300 evenings and 2,300 mornings? Or is it 2,300 evenings and mornings together? If it's 2,300 evenings and mornings together, that'd be 3.5 years, right? Because that would be, I guess, what would that be? 1,250 evenings and 1,250 mornings? Is that right? Whereas if it's 2,300 evenings and 2,300 mornings, that'd be about 7 years. And so people debate about that.
Okay. Gotcha.
It's just a matter of debate. And honestly, either one works, because Antiochus Epiphanes, like his persecution against the Jewish people lasted roughly 7 years, but him cutting off the sacrifices lasted about 3.5. And so really either one works. And so I would almost lean towards the 3.5 year one, just because it specifically says, how long will the vision about the regular sacrifice apply? So it seems like it's chiefly talking about the sacrifices being cut off. And because later on in the book of Daniel, we're going to have the language of like times, and half a time. So like 3.5 years again. So I would lean towards it probably being that.
Yeah, I would imagine they would probably give a bit more of a specific detail if it meant like mornings and evenings like separated from like being part of one day.
Yeah, and so it seems like it's probably 3.5 years, but really either way. And then after all of that, then the holy place will be made righteous. And so it will be in a state of uncleanliness and wickedness for a time period, and God will allow that, but then it will be restored. And this is also, again, keep in mind that all of this, we have to interpret, like, we have to remember what prophets do, right? In general, they typically prophesy short-term, long-term. And so a lot of this paves the way for why later on in the book of Revelation, John will repurpose some of these visions and apply it to a yet future event. Keep in mind that John is writing after Antiochus Epiphanes. And Jesus, in the Olivet Discourse, in like Matthew 24 and 25 and stuff, he is talking hundreds of years after Antiochus Epiphanes. But even Jesus will say that one day the abomination of desolation will sit in the temple. And so Jesus, like, they know that Daniel took place in the past. They knew that this stuff took place in the past, yet they still anticipated that somehow in the future there was a yet future event that would take place. And what's ironic about that is that it seems like Jesus also was speaking short-term and long-term, to where the Romans also, they also sacrificed in the temple before they destroyed it. But then when you get to like Revelation and stuff, it would seem to suggest that one day, people debate about this depending on how you interpret Revelation, but if you interpret Revelation as speaking of future events, most people would agree that there would have, like, one day there's going to be another temple in Jerusalem, sacrifices are going to be restored, and then there's going to be another abomination of desolation that takes place by this final Antichrist figure. Again, people debate about that, but I just want to keep in mind that there's layers to this, to where, yes, Daniel's talking about Antiochus, but he's also, in a way, talking about Titus later on with the Romans, and then he's also going to talk about this Antichrist figure. And again, you've got this little horn showing up, to where in chapter 7, the little horn was from Rome, but now in this one, the little horn is from Greece, and in a way, both horns represent a future little horn that's going to rise up that's like this Antichrist. And so it's like they're all shadows of what's to come. And if you think that's far-fetched, just remember that this is the same thing with the Messiah as well, to where you have these many little m Messiahs that show up prior to the capital M Jesus showing up. So David is a type of the Messiah. Solomon is a type of the Messiah. Hezekiah is a type. Josiah is a type. And then eventually the Messiah shows up. And so it's the same thing with the anti-Messiah, the Antichrist.
Yeah, I was getting ready to say, it mentions like many antichrists have gone up, and then it talks about like a main one who's gonna like gain power over the whole world or something.
Yeah. Well, and the fun fact about this, we don't talk about this very often, but the Antichrist, like really, you can trace the first teaching about him all the way back to Genesis chapter 3. Because whenever God says, I'll put enmity between you and the woman, and your seed and her seed, and he shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel, like, the implication there is like, there's the woman who represents the people of God, and there's the serpent which represents the devil and the people who succumb to like live in wickedness and evil. And then there's the seed of both. Mm-hmm. And when you first hear the seed mentioned, you interpret that as being a people group, right? So it's the family of God and the family of the world, right? But then you get to the bottom and it says, he will bruise your head. And so you've got this one seed from the woman who will bruise the head of the serpent and will crush sin once and for all. But since that singular, like the third person male singular, reinterprets seed as being both a reference to a group of people and a singular person, you can also apply that same logic to the seed of the serpent. To where, yes, there is going to be the worldly kingdom that is opposed to the messianic kingdom, but just like there's going to be this Messiah who rises from the woman, there's also going to be this anti-Messiah that rises from the serpent, right? So it's not explicitly mentioned, but it is implicit in the first gospel message, which is just kind of cool. To where
It's true.
We don't really talk about that part as much because it's not as explicit, but you do get the idea that there's going to be this Antichrist figure who shows up, and that's where the apostles get it from. So verse 15. Now it happened when I, Daniel, had seen the vision that I sought to understand it. Because keep in mind, it's easier for us to understand this because we are living thousands of years after this, and we know who Alexander the Great is, and we know who Antiochus Epiphanes is. Daniel is living hundreds of years before this, and he's like, all he is doing is he saw a ram butting into everything and conquering. Then he saw a goat come in, conquer the ram, break its horns, and then he saw the horn break off the goat, and then 4 horns grew up, and then a small horn grew up out of another one, and then somehow he sees this small horn rising up to heaven, casting down stuff, and like doing stuff in the temple to where Daniel's just like, and also keep in mind through all of this, as Daniel's writing, there is no temple, right? The temple of Jerusalem is not there. And so Daniel, in addition to this, Daniel is seeing a rebuilt Jerusalem with a rebuilt temple, but that temple's being desecrated. And so Daniel's just like he feels like he's on like an acid trip right now. Like, what is going on? So
yeah, that would make it a little harder to interpret things when you're not even focused because you're like so emotionally stimulated by so much happening.
yeah, there's just all this stuff happening, and he does not have the benefit of hindsight. So when I, Daniel, had seen this vision, I sought to understand it, and behold, standing before me was one who had the appearance of a man. Wait a second, one who had the appearance of a man. Where have we seen language like that, Daniel? We've seen it kind of twice.
With the vision of the 4 beasts and...
Yeah, so in the previous chapter, there was one like a son of man who was riding on the clouds. Okay? The language is going to be a little bit different now, and that's because we're writing in Hebrew, not in Aramaic.
Oh, and then also with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
Yes, and in that place, it was one who had the appearance of like one of the son of the gods.
Yeah.
And so we have this person who's like one like the son of the gods, and then we have one like the son of man, and now this person has the appearance of a man. And so to me, it would seem to suggest that the person that Daniel sees here is the same person that he saw in the previous vision, right? Because he doesn't just say it doesn't say standing before me was a man. It's one who was like a man. So it's the same language. And I heard the voice of a man between the banks of Ulai, and he called out and said, Gabriel, give this man an understanding of what has appeared. So I'm assuming that the voice he hears is the voice of the one with the appearance of a man. Would y'all agree with that?
Yeah.
Say it one more time.
I'm assuming that the voice, it says, I heard the voice of a man. I'm assuming that the voice belongs to the one who had the appearance of a man in the previous verse.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It almost seems like...
Yeah, because it doesn't simply say with his voice, it says a man's voice. Like, instead of like referring directly to the other man.
I guess the way I read it was there's a guy standing before him and someone else told him to like explain it.
Oh, so you would say that the one with the appearance of a man is Gabriel?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know.
And that's possible.
It said someone standing before him, and then it says another guy sitting between the banks.
Oh, that's
Call
true.
out.
That's true. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that could be it. New conspiracy theory: Gabriel is Jesus.
True.
That'd be wild, because then you have Gabriel showing up later on to announce to Mary, "Hey, by the way, you're gonna have a kid. Who's the kid? Me." And the ironic part about that is that Jehovah's Witnesses aren't that far off, because they say that Michael is Jesus.
Yeah.
And so, so I heard the voice of a man between the banks of the Ulai, and he called out and said, "Gabriel, give this man an understanding of what has appeared." And so this voice, I wonder why it's between the banks of the Ulai. Like
Maybe
that.
he's standing like in the middle of the Mediterranean.
Well, the Ulai it's river.
Oh,
It's river, but
Between the banks would be like in the river.
yeah.
I'm assuming so. Yeah, he's standing in the river. Well, except the thing is, it doesn't. You don't see the man. That's why I'm confused. It just says he hears the voice of a man between the banks of the Ulai.
Oh.
To where it's like it's almost like the voice is coming from the river itself. I guess I don't know. That's a weird detail. I have no idea.
Living water.
Yeah. And so he calls out and says, "Gabriel, give this man an understanding of what has appeared." So he came near to me where I was standing, and when he came, I was terrified and fell on my face. This is going to be how John responds whenever angels stand before him as well.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I mean, this is why every time an angel shows up, they say, "Do not be afraid,"
Yeah.
because there's something about them that are very intimidating.
Otherworldly, very bright, majestic looking beings that are probably like much bigger than us when they're
Yeah.
here.
And what does Gabriel mean? He's like strength of God. Is that right? Like, is it like Gibor El? I think.
Probably.
Yeah. So Gabriel, he's one of the two angels that are named in the Bible, or the two divine messengers of God that are named. There's Gabriel and Michael.
For some reason, I was thinking Michael was strength of God, but
I think Michael means who is like God.
yeah, I think
Michael and Micah, I think, like are from the same, because I think they both mean the same thing.
Yeah.
I think you're right. Yeah, so he was like God.
Yeah, because I actually was curious about that. I looked that up some years ago, and I distinctly remember that.
Yeah. So Gabriel is warrior of God or man of God. Oh, so it's not even from
Oh, it's not from Geber?
It is from Gibor. Yeah. So it's just how they translate it. Yeah. So it's from the same word.
Mighty man of God.
Yeah. Every time I think of that, I just always think of whenever I went to Israel, and like nowadays, I guess like Geber just does mean man, and
Yeah.
whenever you go to the men's restroom, it just says like it's like the Gibor reading room, like just. But I always think of it the biblical way, where it's like it's the mighty men room. Like I love that so much.
My men gotta take a break.
Yeah, it's like
It's
it's like whenever you're trying to convince like your like little son to like. You know, you gotta go to the bathroom. This is your mighty men room. Just
This is your rite of passage. Go in there,
Yeah.
and you'll become a mighty man.
yeah.
Out the other side.
Yeah. So he says, "Gabriel, give this man an understanding of what has appeared." So he came near where I was standing, and when he came near, I was terrified. I fell on my face. But he said to me, "Son of man, understand that the vision pertains to the time of the end." Okay. So first off, he calls Daniel son of man, very similar to what Ezekiel is going to be called, but also very similar to the language we saw in Daniel chapter 7, where there was one like a son of man. And so it makes sense for an angel to talk to a man this way, though, because like an angel is not a son of man, right? So he's it's kind of like whenever you read like Narnia, and it says, "Oh, a son of Adam and a daughter of Eve." Like it's just it's a category of people.
Mm-hmm.
So son of, I'm assuming that's. Let me check. Is that Ben Adam?
Yeah, I know Ben means son of.
Let me see. But the phrase is, yeah, Ben Adam. So it's just son of Adam, which I kind of wish we translate it like that. That'd be cool. Ben,
Yeah.
son of Adam.
Mm-hmm.
Understand that the vision pertains to the time of the end. So what does Gabriel claim?
He claims that this is in relation to the end times.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
The question becomes the end of what?
Yeah. And say, what's the word for end there?
End?
Like, is it just literally just mean end or?
Yeah, it's a.
Well, the fact that it just says the end would probably imply like the end of all human history, whenever nothing else will have to be recorded anymore.
So it says le'et ketz, and it just means like end, like Yeah, so it just means like afterwards, or I've heard people compare it to like just the butt. Like it's like it's the butt of time. Like it's just it's the end.
That's
the
an
caboose. The caboose.
Very interesting comparison.
Yeah. Yeah. So like whenever like you see it whenever Genesis 4. Now it happened in the course of time that Cain brought an offering to Yahweh. So at the end of time. So it doesn't have to refer to the very end of all things. It's just saying at the end of the time that we're dealing with. You know.
Yeah. Okay.
Genesis 6. The end of all flesh has come before me. So like. Not everybody died. I mean, most people died, but and then Genesis 8. Now it happened at the end of 40 days, so it literally just means end. But we do see. I'm sure that's the same word that we do see later on in like. It actually is not the same word. So there's a different phrase that is used in the Bible when referring to the latter days, right? So like in Genesis chapter 49, whenever. Where Jacob says, I will tell my sons what's going to happen in the latter days. And then in Deuteronomy 32 and stuff like that, where he says, I will tell you what's going to happen in the latter days. That's a different phrase. And it seems like that phrase is specifically used in reference to the end of all things, like the eschaton. Whereas this seems to just be...
More like a referential term.
Yeah, it's a referential term. And I think that there could be a dual meaning because of like what we said, the short-term, long-term fulfillment. To where it is the end of all time in regards to, it's going to bring an end to this certain epoch that Daniel is currently living in.
Yeah, like the exile, basically.
Yeah, it's going to bring like to the exile and also just to this, almost like the first stage of the time of the Gentiles, right? But then it also, I would suggest, it does pertain to the final end as well, right? To where all the things that you're seeing here, again, they are shadows of what is ultimately to come.
Yeah, well, I guess because those final days are kind of like the end of the age of the Gentiles as well.
Yes, yeah. And so, verse 18, now while he was talking with me, I sank into a deep sleep with my face to the ground. So I love that like Daniel apparently just never got up. He like fell to his face before Gabriel, and he just falls asleep. Which is
You got overstimulated. Yeah, take a breather.
Like what I'm assuming is that this is suggesting that he like passed out. I don't know. Either that or it's like it's almost like in a fairy tale, like just like a mysterious sleep falls upon him. I don't think that it's like he got bored and just like dozed off.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm fair with the interpretation that he was overstimulated, just got knocked out from pure just emotional exhaustion. Like, oh boy.
Yeah.
There's a lot to think about. I think I'm taking that now.
Yeah. I was looking to see if it was the same phrase as in Genesis, but it's not.
I was just thinking of like Isaiah 6, where he like has the angel, like the cherubim or seraphim, like touch him with a coal, and he like tells him his sins are forgiven.
Yeah.
Like if there was any kind of like resemblance there, like him like falling down like in the presence of like a angelic being, and like touch them and he stands upright.
Yeah. I don't know.
That might be a stretch.
I mean, I'm sure the word for touch there is the same. Cause yeah, it's the because that's just the general word for touch. But yeah, I have no idea. Like I don't know. There's certain stuff in here. The only stuff that I know how to interpret this chapter is the stuff that Gabriel interprets for us. Because the rest of it, I'm like I don't, like there's something going on there. I sank into a deep sleep with my face to the ground, but he touched me and made me stand upright.
Yeah.
He's like, bro, I was sent to explain something to you. Don't fall asleep on me. Get up. Like it could be as simple as that.
I know it's not taking what you got in.
Yeah. I'm trying to see if it's the same word as Isaiah. Just one second. It is the same word. And he touched my mouth with it and said, behold, this has touched your lips. So, but then he said, behold, I am going to let you know what will happen at the final period of the indignation. What is the indignation referring to?
Time before Christ.
I forgot what indignation means, so I'm not maybe we have a good answer either.
I'm gonna assume he's referring to like the time before Christ.
I think indignation means like a conquest.
Indignation means like anger.
Anger.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I would assume this has to either refer to the fact of like, I guess depending on who the object of the indignation is, because it describes earlier as the ram and the goat striking in wrath, and so there is a sense of like the indignation of the goat and the ram, but then also the period where the sacrifice is removed, you could say that this is like the period of indignation is the time, like, and this is what they just recently asked about, was the period of the sacrifice being removed. This could be like God's indignation as well.
I think that's probably like, well, I can actually see it being a middle mix of both. I've seen some people interpret this as stemming from Deuteronomy 32, which is interesting because the language, as far as I can tell, doesn't show up in Deuteronomy 32. But they have interpreted this as whenever God shows up in fury to judge the nations for how they've treated Israel, right? So it's
fair.
What's that?
That's fair.
Yeah, so it's like specifically at the end. To where it says, "Is it not laid up in store with me, sealed up in my treasuries? Vengeance is mine, and retribution. In due time, their foot, the nation's foot, will stumble. For the day of their disaster is near, and the impending things are hastening upon them. For Yahweh will render justice to his people. He will have compassion on his slaves. When he sees their strength is gone, and there is none remaining, bond or free. And he will say, where are their gods, the rock in which they sought refuge? Who ate the fat of their sacrifices, and drank the wine of their drink offerings? Let them rise up and help you. Let them be your hiding place. See now that I am he. There is no God beside me. It is I who put to death and give life. I have wounded. It is I who heal. There is none who can deliver from my hand. Indeed, I lift up my hand to heaven and say as I live forever, if I sharpen my flashing sword and my hand takes hold on judgment, I will render vengeance to my adversaries, and I will repay those who hate me." And so some people interpret this as being like the indignation of which he's speaking.
Yeah.
I don't know, like, there's not like a linguistic reason for that. But I love a good reference to Deuteronomy 32, so I'm not going to complain.
Yeah. I could see it just because, as we've talked before about, it seems like even they recognize when they come back from the exile that the exile is not really over.
Yeah.
So that would also mean that they're probably still subject to the curse of the Torah.
Yeah.
If they're not being obedient.
Yeah, and so his indignation is against them, but it's also building up against the nations who are oppressing them as well. So it's really against both.
Yeah.
Which makes more sense for the period of the indignation. He's indignant at everybody. For it pertains to the appointed time of the end. The ram which you saw with two horns, like, I love this. Gabriel is the best. Like, I think we need Gabriel to show up more often and just explain scripture, because he is so straightforward. It's kind of like the difference between like Paul and John.
Yeah.
Right? Paul, he's over here like writing like these super complex books where like you just like are left scratching your head being like, I feel like I don't understand what's going on. Whereas John shows up and he's like, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And you're like, I get it now. This is great. Like John is just so simple. He's like, God is love. And if anybody says they are of God and they do not love, they are liars. You're like, that is so straightforward. Thank you, John. like so Gabriel is the John of the angels, where he just shows up and he's like, let me give you an explanation. I just love it. He says, the ram which you saw with two horns is the kings of Media and Persia. Sweet. That's exactly what we said. Now, the shaggy goat is the king of Greece, which we would say Alexander the Great. And the large horn that is between his eyes is the first king. And so, again, that's that interesting idea that the animal and the horn both represent the king, right? Because it's both the king and the kingdom, right?
Yeah.
So, the goat itself is the kingdom of Greece, but it is also Alexander as a whole, right? Moving across with great speed, because the king represents the kingdom and the king represents the king, but also the horn itself is the first king from that kingdom. And again, Alexander was not the first king of Greece, technically, but he is the first king of the Grecian Empire, as it really came to where his father, Philip of Macedon, was like a really important guy, but not nearly as important as Alexander. And Alexander's the one who conquered everything. And the broken horn and the four horns that stood in his place are four kingdoms which will take their stand from his nation, although not with his power. Which is exactly what we talked about, right? It's Antigonus, what was it, what is the one that starts with an L? So there's Antigonus, the Seleucids, the Ptolemies, and then
It's the one I don't know.
Lysimachus. And so that's all ties into that. And then Gabriel starts spitting bars. In the latter period of the reign, when the transgressions When the transgressors have run their course, a king will stand, insolent and skilled in intrigue. So who's he talking about here?
Antagonist?
Antiochus. Antiochus. Yeah. So Antigonus was a different, like, all the names kind of sound very familiar. Antigonus is one of the kingdoms, but Antiochus Epiphanes is the small horn that rises from the Seleucid Empire. So in the latter period of their reign, so towards the end of this time period, when the transgressors have run their course, so whenever they have basically they have grown so mighty that God has to overthrow them, a king will stand, insolent and skilled in intrigue. If you look into Antiochus Epiphanes' reign, he was a master manipulator and very good at the whole intrigue stuff. I mean, most politicians are, but if you actually look into the history of how he got to where he was, it's a very accurate description of him. His power will be mighty, but not by his own power. What does that mean?
Either one or two interpretations. A, God was like, fine, you can do it, and kind of gave him the power. Or B, as we were talking about earlier, kind of manipulated his way to the top and was very crafty.
Yeah.
And was elevated by other people.
Yeah, so I could see really three interpretations, those two, and I think that the answer is really going to be all three of them.
Yeah.
God allowed him to be that powerful. Secondly, he manipulated his way. It's not like he inherited the power. And then also, thirdly, just the idea that the only reason he is powerful is because of the kingdom he's ruling over. It's not because he is inherently like the biggest and best. Like, he's no Alexander the Great, right?
Yeah.
He was just like, he is in charge of a kingdom that was already powerful. And so he abuses the power. And so he will destroy to an astonishing degree and succeed and do his will. Very apt description of Antiochus. And he will destroy mighty men and the holy people. So he's going to conquer a lot of people in general, and he's going to conquer the people of God in specific, right? So the Jewish people. Keep in mind that at this time period, the Jewish people aren't exactly necessarily living for God that much. I mean, surprise, surprise. So I just think it's interesting that God consistently calls them the holy people, even though they're not necessarily being holy.
Yeah.
And that's just worth keeping in mind even nowadays, because one common argument I see people pushing back against when it comes to like the Jewish people is they say, well, how can you even call them like God's chosen people? They're not worshiping the Messiah. They rejected him. And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of like what they did for the majority of their history in the Bible as well. Like, whenever the prophet like Isaiah is rebuking the people, it's not like they're being obedient. Like, no, they're worshiping all sorts of other gods, yet God still calls them my people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so we just have to kind of keep that in mind. So he's calling them the holy people here. And through his insight, he will cause deceit to succeed by his hand. And so, again, he's just manipulating his way to power. And he will magnify himself in his heart, and he will destroy many while they are at ease. He will even stand against the Prince of Princes. Who is the Prince of Princes?
Jesus.
God.
Well, just God in general, right?
Yeah.
So the King of Kings, right? Which also would be Jesus. But so he will stand even against the Prince of Princes, but he will be broken without hands. What does that mean?
Won't have any power left.
He's gonna be taken down without even whoever's gonna take him down will take him down without even having to wield a sword. Essentially.
Yeah.
Is this saying without hands like referring to him or like the act of him being broken?
What do you mean?
I think it's referring. Okay, so I believe it's referring to the act, right? But he will be broken, so he's going to be broken. We assume by something or someone without hands.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I read it.
What were you meaning, Sean?
Like, not a trick question. I was just saying, like, is the without hands saying, like, describing, like, how he's being broken? Like, sorry, it's like a really simple question I'm trying to ask, but is it just saying, like, he's going to basically be, like, toppled without a hand being raised because, like, he's causing his own downfall?
I think that's what it's getting at. Like, I think it's like he's bringing about his own downfall, and it's not like his downfall is not going to be the same as like Alexander conquering the, like whenever you have Alexander conquering the Persians, it's depicted as a goat literally just like destroying a ram, whereas this one, it's actually very similar to Alexander, where the horn just broke. I think that's kind of what's going on here. And sure enough, the way Antiochus died is he just got ill and died. People say that it was. I think it was like after like a bad military campaign, like where he like suffered major losses. He just got severely distressed and fell ill and died. I think there are some sources which claim that he was killed, but I think the more like common one is that he literally just died. So, went out and was like,
Okay, I see.
and what had appeared about the evenings and mornings, which has been told to you, is true. And so that there will be 2,600? 2,300. 2,300. Which was told to you is true. But as for you, conceal the vision, for it pertains to many days in the future. So even Gabriel says, by the way, this ain't tomorrow. This is way down there. Like you are seeing.
Forget about it.
Yeah. Which is funny because again, this is literally 400 years into the future. Daniel is receiving this vision in 550 BC. And the events that are being described here are taking place in the 160s BC. So the events are actually taking place closer to the time of Messiah than they are to the time of Daniel, which is pretty crazy. And so then it says, I, Daniel, was exhausted and sick for days. Then I rose up again and did the king's work, but I was appalled at what had appeared, and there was none to make me understand it. So even though Gabriel explains it to Daniel, what is his overall response?
He's like, I'm still lost.
So he's still lost. Why is he exhausted and sick?
Yeah, there was some real disturbing stuff.
It was really disturbing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like the whole ignorance is bliss thing.
Yeah.
We kind of saw this with Jeremiah, where Jeremiah goes down in history as the weeping prophet. Why? Because he knew that Jerusalem was going to fall during his time. And Daniel just got way more insight than that, right? Daniel saw Jerusalem being rebuilt, and he saw kingdoms rising and falling and rising and falling, and each kingdom that follows is mightier and more powerful and more wicked than the last. And then eventually one of these kingdoms is going to raise up a king that is going to persecute God's people even more, put them to death, cut off sacrifices, desecrate the temple, make all things wicked, and God's just going to allow it to happen. And keep in mind, in this vision, it doesn't end with the Son of Man riding on the clouds and conquering everything, right? This vision is primarily a downer of a vision. And so I think it makes sense that Daniel gets up and he's exhausted and sick for days. Like, he's just like, I mean, for us reading it, I don't think we understand the full impact of what this type of experience would have on a person.
It's like having a dream where you feel like you lived like 5 lifetimes in one night, and you're just like, you wake up, you just like don't even know what to do. Just like, I feel really weird, but I don't know, like.
Well, especially if you like, keep in mind, like think of it, like if this happened tonight. Imagine you went to bed, and you had a dream, but it wasn't just a dream. It was very clearly a vision given to you from God, predicting the next 400 years, and things only got worse. Right? It's like okay, America's gonna fall, and another nation is going to rise up in America's place. And it's going to be a totalitarian regime. And everybody's going to become slaves. And you're going to lose your house. And you're going to live in the sewers. And your descendants are going to live in sewers.
They're going to like live broadcasting, like executing people or something.
Yeah. And then that kingdom's going to fall. And another kingdom's going to rise in its place. And this one's going to be straight up anarchy. And your relatives are going to wish that they lived in sewers. Because now they're being hunted down and killed. It's like imagine you had a vision like that, and it wasn't simply like, a sci-fi dystopian future thing. It was something that you knew was going to happen, and it didn't just span for like 2 decades. No, this is like this is us falling asleep right now and seeing what's going to happen until the year 2426. Like, I can't even wrap my mind around there being a year 2426, right? 400 years from now. Like, imagine you knew exactly what was going to go down, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. And then, in the midst of all of this, you see what's going on in churches at this time. And there are no longer people who are gathering together in pews and singing worship songs to God. Instead, there are people who are going in there burning crosses and ripping up Bibles and spitting in the face of God and ripping out the beards of pastors and priests and just like, I don't know, like taking communion bread and ripping it up and feeding it to the pigs and taking the wine and just like throwing it on the ground. Like you're just seeing this and you're like, oh my gosh, like this would be absolutely terrifying. And then you wake up and you're just like, this is what's coming. Like that would be absolutely terrifying. And so we kind of have to step into Daniel's mind to understand why this is so scary for him.
Yeah.
Because for us, it's all in the past. We're like, oh, that's whatever. But keep in mind, like we said, there seems to be a short-term and long-term fulfillment here, to where, in many ways, what Daniel sees here is a shadow of what's to come.
Mm-hmm.
In which case, we have to realize that there might be stuff like this yet in the future. And I would argue that whenever you take the grand scope of Scripture together, right, all the prophets, both Old and New Testament, it would suggest that this is what awaits us in the future. And contrary to what many of my Baptist brothers believe, I don't think that we're going to be poofed away to escape it. To where I think that whenever you look at Scripture, it seems to suggest that we're going to be here for it. Kind of like Daniel sees with, God allows the Jewish people to suffer under Antiochus. It seems like we might also have to be here to suffer through that as well. I pray I'm wrong, but that's just stuff to keep in mind, to where it should... I don't know, it's not like Daniel's rebuked for being exhausted and sick at this, right? Instead, it's like, no, this is a reasonable response. Whenever you see this type of stuff going down, you should be sick from it. You should be like, oh, this was terrible. So what do y'all think about this vision? Then we'll talk about application, then we can wrap up. We actually got through the whole chapter. Look at that.
Yeah.
What do y'all think about the vision as a whole? Or let me ask this question. Why do you think God gave Daniel this vision? Was he just wanting to torment him?
No, he wanted to give him a picture and an idea of what's going to happen. It's essentially saying, look, it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better.
Yeah.
I think one possible thing to consider, especially when you consider when this vision came to Daniel, you said this is during the reign of the last king, right?
Belshazzar, yeah.
So within his lifetime, they're expecting to go back into Israel and rebuild, right? It seems to me like this isn't too different than the same way that Moses would have been talking to the people before entering the promised land, saying, I've said before you life and death, choose life that you may live. Otherwise, you might, like, God's going to exile you guys. And the Israelites had the whole Torah to look back on to realize that they need to be better. I could see this vision just kind of being a healthy reminder to the people that when they return from exile, that things need to change.
Yeah.
And so they need to, follow Torah and be more, they need to change their hearts.
Yeah.
And actually come back from exile.
Yeah. And I think he's tempering their expectations, right? Because keep in mind, this is our first chapter that's back in Hebrew, right? So chapters 2 through 7 are in Aramaic, and it seems like that's because the message is written not just for the Jewish people, but for everybody, right? For the Babylonians. It's a message for the Gentiles. Whereas it seems like, since this is in Hebrew again, it's written specifically to the Jewish people, keeping them in mind. And I think it might be tempering their expectations just so that they don't get their hopes up too highly and then get disappointed by God whenever they go back to Jerusalem and things aren't, it's like the Messiah doesn't arrive immediately. He's letting them know, guys, this is what you can expect. And it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. And he says it's going to be for hundreds of years, right? This is, it literally ends, for it pertains to many days in the future. And so I think it does, it's to call the Jewish people to sober-minded, repentance, and say, get your act together, because as we're going to see when we get to Daniel chapter 9 next week, it seems like the prolonged judgment here is because the Jewish people still haven't learned their lesson. To where they're going to learn one lesson, right? One of the main reasons they were sent off into captivity is because of idolatry. And they're going to learn no more idols. So pretty much after they come back from Babylon, idolatry ceases to be a problem for the Jewish people. However, there are other issues that they face. And so it does seem like, in many ways, God allows this to continue going because they still have not learned to hear Him. And so, I think that this could be to call them to repent, to call them to focus on Torah, but also just to sober them up and say, guys, it's like, don't look at the future through, rose-colored glasses where you're thinking that, if only we could get back to Jerusalem, everything will be better. No, it's not going to be. There's going to be Persia. And you're going to think that Persia's amazing because they're going to let you go back to Jerusalem, but whenever Daniel describes Persia, they're a terrifying beast. And so sure, it might benefit you a little bit, and things might be better for you during their time, but keep in mind who they are on a global scale. They're demolishing people. And then Greece is going to show up, and they're going to change everything. I mean, there's a reason why whenever you get to the New Testament, it's written in a different language. It's because the Greek Empire, it changes everything, right? All of a sudden, everybody's speaking Greek. All of a sudden, there's different customs and all this different stuff. And so, I think Daniel could be just sobering them up for that, for sure. But what is the main takeaway from this? Is it just supposed to be negative? Is God just trying to make them depressed?
No, he's just trying to set expectations.
Okay. But what is the one silver lining here? That, once I point it out, it should seem obvious, but I want to see if somebody else can get it.
It doesn't end with all the tyranny.
Well, I mean, this vision kind of does,
Yeah.
right? Chapter 7 talked about the one like the Son of Man and stuff like that. This vision doesn't get there. This vision, it kind of starts and ends pretty badly. What's the silver lining?
Well, I guess the silver lining seems to be for one that they're going to return back and rebuild the temple. So
Okay.
that's good.
There's that.
It does say that eventually the people in power will fall.
Yeah.
And it says, because at the end of verse 25 it says, he will be broken, but he will be broken without hands. So that's an encouraging sign. It sounds like he's going to fall with ease.
Okay. The silver lining I'm getting at actually comes to the source of the vision in and of itself, right? How is it that Daniel is able to predict these things with 100% accuracy?
God.
Because he's getting the information from God. And how is it that God knows these things are going to happen 400 years before they happen?
He's God and he created everything.
And beyond him creating everything, he's in control of everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that the silver lining behind all of this is that, yes, things are going to get horrible, but the only reason Daniel knows that they're going to be horrible is because God is so much in control that he is able to accurately predict everything that's going to go on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is one of those, this should comfort us because, even practically speaking in our own lives, whenever something horrible happens in your life, for us, it's unexpected. But for God, he knew it was going to happen from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And so it kind of gives us a different perspective of things to where if Daniel didn't give this prophecy and the Jewish people did go back and things just got worse and worse and worse, they might be tempted to think, where's God? And they might be tempted to doubt him. But instead, they go back and they know exactly what's going to happen. And as it unfolds, they say, yes, God said this. And with every bad thing that happens, it comes as a reminder that God is sovereign and God is in control. And ultimately, the prophecy of chapter 7 will come to pass. Does that make sense? To where it's imagine you knew every single bad thing that was going to happen in your life. That would be terrifying. But every single time one of those new things happened, it would increase your confidence that God is true. And God is faithful and in control, right?
It's kind of like what we talked about with Jeremiah and the exile. The conclusion was that ultimately the exile only further confirmed God's faithfulness because he said it would happen.
Yeah. And then this one would be that to an extreme because he lists out dates, he lists out names, he's specifically describing movements that cannot be there's a reason why historians try to date this so much later because it's so specific that you literally you can't argue that it's talking about anything else. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so this stuff should increase your confidence in God. So even as your world is falling apart, you are learning to rely more fully on the God who is allowing it to fall apart because it's not catching him by surprise, right? You're like, well, no, he said, yep, there's the goat and there's the 4 horns and there's the little horn. This is what God would say. There's the abomination of desolation. It's no longer a surprise because God said it. And I don't know. I think that if that happened in our own life, we would respond like Daniel, being exhausted and sick, but also it would strengthen our confidence, right? I don't know. I just imagine years ago, if an angel had appeared to me in a dream and said, hey, by the way, your dad is going to die on May 8th, 2020. And about a year and a half later, you're going to be going on a hike through the Grand Canyon, and you're going to get severely dehydrated and almost die. And then a few years later, you're going to have these weird aching joint pains, and then you're going to end up in the ICU. And if all that stuff, if that was predicted to me ahead of time, and then it started happening, it would not make the experience of it happening easier to go through. But as it happened, I would be like, oh, hey, God said this would happen. I guess he's still in control. And
Yeah.
the thing is, I know he's in control anyways, but the reason I know he's in control is because of the stuff that I've read in Scripture. You know, to where, like, I don't need him to predict that stuff in my own life because I've already seen how he's done that in Scripture. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's not necessary for us to, every person individually, to know their future. Instead, we see how God's faithful in the past, and so we can trust he's faithful in the present. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so I think that the end takeaway is a very positive takeaway from this chapter. You're like, oh, God's in control. But then you have the more complex theology underlying all of it, that God is in control, and even though he is good, he allows bad things to happen willfully and advance ahead of time, to where it will challenge you to have a deeper understanding of who God is. Because, I don't know, like sometimes, like nowadays, one of the biggest challenges that people have, like when it comes to like their relationship with God, that it's like, how can a good God allow evil to exist? And what I love is that if you're looking at Daniel, he's not even wrestling through that question, because to him it's like, no, God, like, not only is he allowing evil to exist, he is like actually organizing things where he is intentionally permitting evil to persist for a prolonged amount of time. Mm-hmm. To where it actually requires you to where, like, if you're going to have a biblical view of who God is, you need to get past the problem of evil, because God is so much more deeper, and like his ways are so much more complex than simply, oh no, how can God allow evil? It's like, if you're asking that question, you're still at like theology 101.
You can easily counter that with the question, well, how can there be evil without a standard like God to determine what's good and evil?
Which is true. But I just think that that's interesting. Like the stuff that Daniel's wrestling through is so much more deep than, this is probably just where I'm getting kind of cynical, but a lot of times, like, I get frustrated by whenever Christians, like, the stuff that they're wrestling through, it shows how poorly our churches are doing at discipling them, because the questions that they're wrestling through are things that it seems like Daniel and the prophets would view as prerequisites to even believing in God. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, yeah, like, obviously evil exists, but we still believe God is good. To where the stuff he's wrestling through here is so much more complex, to where it's like, well, yeah, like, we believe that this good God is actually setting aside times where he intentionally allows evil to be, like, extra severe against innocent people. And to me, I think that's a lot more complex to wrestle through. But, I don't know.
Yeah.
Do y'all have anything you want to add about the chapter? Specifically in regards to application, or maybe modern insights that we could take from it?
All I know is kingdoms will rise and fall, and they seem to get proud and arrogant, and like nobody can stop us. They're stopped and destroyed.
Yeah. And I think that actually should be a humbling thing for us, because again, Daniel is not being like, this vision is not exhaustive for all human history. It is exhaustive for a specific portion of history that God is revealing to Daniel. But there, even in these two instances we see here, there's a trend, right? There's these empires that rise, they grow mighty, they begin to view themselves as mighty, and God humbles them. And we see this again and again and again throughout history. And this should both comfort us and also, like, convict us. It should comfort us that even though things rise and fall, all of it's in God's hands, right? To where us living in America, I hate to break it to you, yes, the news channels, or I don't know, our hyper-conservative grandpas and stuff like that, they might try to convince you that America is the best thing that's ever existed and nothing will ever be like it and it will never fall. But the people in Assyria said the same thing, and the people in Babylon said the same thing, and the people in Persia and Greece and Rome, they all said the same thing. Every empire or kingdom that has ever existed has always thought they would never fall. But they will, right? The only kingdom that's going to endure forever is the Messianic kingdom. And I hate to break it to you, America ain't it.
Yeah.
And I think that should comfort us, because it should remind us our hope is not in this. And so guess what? Even if the nation falls, that's okay. God's still in control. Things might get worse for us, but guess what? God's people have always been thrown in the midst of drama, and they, it's like that's okay. Like we've had the privilege of living at a very comfortable time, and so we shouldn't allow our faith in God to be shaken because things are going to get more difficult, And so maybe things will get better in America, maybe they won't. I have no idea. Only time will tell. But regardless of what happens, God is still in control, and it won't catch God by surprise. But it should also convict us, both personally and social, like communally, because it should remind us that God can do the same thing to us, right? If we, wherever we're at, if we find ourselves in a place of prominence or might, we need to not get cocky, right? What is the phrase? Let anyone who stands take heed lest he fall.
Anyone who thinks he stands, take heed lest he fall.
Yeah. That's the lesson we need to take, right? Because Daniel's not the only one to share that message. Pretty much every book of the Bible addresses that theme. Pride comes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. And so if you find yourself in a place of prominence, a place of influence, a place of strength or superiority, be careful. Tread lightly. Because if you for a moment begin to think that that belongs to you and that you did it, God could be gracious and overlook it, but he also could use that as a time to teach you and put you in your place.
Yeah.
So
it only takes us a crumb of that to get prideful.
Yes. Yeah. And we're all guilty of it, right? That's the issue. The human heart, we love taking credit for ourselves. But what we see here is that, if God can do this to a unstoppable kingdom, how much more can he do it to us tiny little individuals, right? Alexander the Great died at 32. And his name, his last name is the Great. It's like this guy conquered the whole world by the time he was like a true adult, and then he just died, right? And left no heir behind, no legacy other than just what he conquered, and then it was just all split up. And so, if God can take down people like that, yeah, he can take down you. And so, that's where you get to Paul saying, it's by grace you have been saved through faith. This is not of your own doing; it's the free gift of God, not a result of works, lest any man boast. The moment you think that you have something to boast in is the moment that you have lost sight of the goodness of God. And so, the best thing you can do, if you are the President of the United States, is give thanks to God because he put you there. If you're the emperor of the Roman Empire, give thanks to God because he put you there. If you are the boss in your company, give thanks to God. If you are the leader of your family, give thanks to God. But don't think that you're in it for yourself, because that's where you start getting cocky and you start serving yourself. And he don't like that, because the moment you start serving yourself is the moment you stop serving others, and that's the moment you start abusing others under your power, and God will not have that. And so he will put you in your place. All right, anything else?
I don't think so.
Sweet. Well, can I get somebody to close us out in prayer? Next week we get into a very fun chapter. It's like stuff that seemingly accurately predicts to a day when the Messiah is going to show up.
Oh yeah, all that.
Yeah. So that will be interesting. So yeah. Anybody want to close out in prayer?